الله استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر اللهم انت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت وتعاليت يا ذا الجلال اللهم اعني على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رضي الله تعالى عنه وعن كافة المؤمنين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In light of the previous holiday of Christmas and the upcoming public holiday of New Year's, I'd like to, for tonight's khatira, tonight's hadith, inshallah ta'ala, will relate a topic or hadith that inshallah ta'ala will relate to both and hopefully remind ourselves of what's going on now, the times we're in, and how to deal with this moment, this time. So as was recorded in the Sunan of Imam al-Tirmidhi, that the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said in an authentic hadith that وَيْلٌ لِلَّذِي, bad news and woe to the one that يحدث بالحديث, that goes to speak words, wants to relate a story or speak some type of words. يضحك منه القوم, in order to make people laugh. Gives a talk and wants to say something funny. Gives a talk and wants to say something amusing. فَلْيَكْذِبْ, and in the process he utters a lie. In the process there's some misinformation. There's something that's not true. Why? Because what's the point? Not that he wanted to lie, but the point is to make people laugh, and so there's an objective. Right? There's a purpose to that. He wants to make people laugh, and so he tells a lie to achieve or accomplish that hadith, that goal. فَيَكْذِبْ, and he lies to achieve that goal. وَيْلٌ لَهُ وَيْلٌ لَهُ, أو كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, woe to that person, woe to that person. وَيْلٌ, we know it in the Quran as well, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ. Wail means, it's a term that in the Islamic sense, it means that that person is ba'id, is distant from at that moment that they're doing that act, they are distant from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the term. At the moment they're doing that act, that action that they're doing places them ba'id, distant from the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Related to this is a very powerful story, a very short story, of a Sahaba whose name is Abdullah ibn Amir. And Abdullah ibn Amir tells a short incident about his life where he says, Da'atni ummi, my mother called me home. This is when he was a child. My mother called me home. And at that time, قَعَدَ فِي بَيْتِنَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in our house. فَقَالَتْ أُمِّي, my mother said, Ta'al, come to me. Abdullah, come to me. I want to give you something. And the Prophet ﷺ, who was sitting in the house, he said to her, to the mother, what do you want to give him? And she replies, tamran, just a date. I just want to give him a date. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, it's reported to have said that if you had not given him something, if you had not given him something, and you called to give him something, if you did not give him something, it would have been written as a kadhbah, a lie. If you had not given him something, you would have gotten a kadhbah. Kadhbah means from kadhb, one lie, kadhbah. One lie. Very powerful story, because as parents, sometimes we do things with our children and they involve lies. Come here, little Ahmed. What do you want, Mom or Dad? Come here, I want to give you something. In reality, I'm going to call your son or daughter to wash the dishes. Come here, I want to give you something. And you want to give them the dish pad. Say, hey, you didn't wash this. Or you want to give them the trash to take out. You know how we call it white lies. Sometimes as parents, we don't take those things seriously. And so the Prophet ﷺ is asking her, what do you want to give him? And she says, tamran. I want to give him a date. Right? Maybe it's true she wanted to give him a date, but the question of the Prophet ﷺ was very powerful, as if he sensed that there was something else that's there. He said, if you didn't give him something, it would have been written that you're a liar. That was a lie. Kadhbah. One lie. Kadhb, lying, is of three types. The first type is lying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah hafazna Allah ta'ala protect us from that. Lying about Allah could involve changing the words of Allah, saying Allah ta'ala said X and He said Y, or even taking something that's halal and changing it into something that's haram, or taking something whose hukum is haram in a clear way, but then you adjust it and make it halal in some way. This is in the category of kadhib ala Allah, lying against Allah. The second is kadhib ala Rasul, lying against the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us a lot about that, because he said, lying on me is not like lying on somebody else. And he said, for the one who lies on me, فَلْيَتَبَوَّ مَقْعَدَهُ فِي النَّارِ, let him take his place, let him choose his seat in the hellfire. So, Hafazallah, may Allah Ta'ala protect us from that. And the third is lying against anyone who's not the Prophet ﷺ, Bani Adam, Bashar, people. And in that category, we tend to, there's levels. There's major lies, there's what people consider white lies, soft lies, little lies, giant lies. We don't, as Ummah Muhammad, we don't have those kinds of categories. A lie is a lie. Whether it's to an adult or whether it's to a child. And so we have to be very careful about our interactions even with children. Even with children. Even when we joke about things. Remember the first hadith, whoever wants to say something, but they mention something to make someone laugh and they laugh. وَيْلٌ لَهُ وَيْلٌ لَهُ. So even in joking we have to be careful. We have to tell our children, even when we're joking, that's a lie. Oh, Baba, I'm just joking. It doesn't matter. That's a lie. Joking is okay. Lying is the limit. And we've entered into a time in our nation, in the country that we live in, where we today are in between two sacred times for the vast majority of people that live in this country and live in the world that we share. And so on the one hand, there's Christmas, which has to do with religion and children. And on the other hand, there's New Year's, which also has to do with religion and children as well. And both holidays dealing with religion and children also at the same time deal with lies as well. At the same time. On the one hand, we have the upcoming holiday, which is a national holiday, public holiday, and definitely the most famous, the most widely recognized public holiday in the world, New Year's Day. The vast majority of people on the globe in some way acknowledge or celebrate or commemorate New Year's Day. It's very interesting and how this relates to the hadith that we're talking about and the overall subject of religion and children and how we deal with children is the idea that New Year's Day originally was a holiday that was birthed around the same time as Christmas. But the difference was that while Christmas acknowledged originally the birth, the alleged day that Prophet Isa ﷺ was born, New Year's was to celebrate the khitan, the circumcision of Prophet Isa ﷺ. In other words, in the Jewish tradition, on the seventh day after the birth, there was circumcision of the male child. There's khitan of the child. And that commemoration was celebrated. And even today, if you go to some churches in the Anglican Christian community or the Lutheran Christian community, they celebrate New Year's Day as a day of khitan, a day of circumcision for Isa ﷺ. They don't celebrate it as a New Year's, for example. The fact that it's a new year means nothing. And the original Jews did the same thing. The fact that it was a new year meant nothing. It was the day that where Isa ﷺ was circumcised. And it was the introduction of introducing religion to your children. The idea that was part of the fitrah. Khitan was part of the fitrah, and that and that day was a day to talk about the fitrah. It was a day to talk about Allah. It was a day to talk about how we should live our lives as people of, at that time, Sayyidina Isa, or people of Ahlul Kitab. So it started as a day of religion connected to children. But then look at how it's been commercialized today. Look at how it's been completely twisted and turned. How it's become a holiday that's associated with nationalism and commercialism and materialism. It's very ironic. The Romans, they used to, as we know, they worship many gods. The Romans worshipped this one god that was called Janus. And this is why the month is called January. And their Roman god Janus had two faces. Two faces. One face looking forward and one face looking to the back. And this god Janus had two personalities as well. And they worship this character. It was very powerful because the ulama say that kadhib, lies, is the foundation, it's an asl, it's a foundation for nifaq, hypocrisy. That is the seed for nifaq, and part of nifaq is having two faces. And so on the one hand, this is a time where a community that at first, on New Year's, was looking towards fitrah and religion. And now, there's a completely different turn, completely different orientation, completely different direction. Materialism and nationalism. Because of a lie. Because of this thing has no longer become a practice. Same thing with Christmas. The idea of Santa Claus and giving gifts to children and coming down chimneys in the winter. I don't know what happens if you don't have a chimney. You just don't get gifts. And he's an overweight guy. He's red and blue, the same colors of Coca-Cola. He's become an iconic symbol of capitalism, iconic symbolic symbol of materialism. You have to be good to get a gift, and if you're not good, well, even though as Muslims we don't ascribe those characteristics to awlad, children who are not baligh, they don't have the sifat of being good or bad, because they're not baligh yet. This is also based upon a lie. And children participate in rituals, writing letters to this figure that doesn't exist, putting food out, believing in Santa Claus. And people conspire to keep this false belief alive. There's a study of research that was done by a professor at Cornell University. And he said he interviewed 500 children about Santa Claus. And he said of these 500 children, not one of them, not one child was upset that their parents told them Santa Claus was real, but in reality they found out he wasn't. When they found out he wasn't real, not one of them was upset. He said he was shocked at this, but then later on, when he started asking other questions, he realized there was a different problem. And he realized that these children who had spent time and years learning false belief and lies from their parents, they had a hard time believing in God. Some of these kids wrote letters to Santa and they wanted certain gifts, and they didn't have those gifts. And so they also learned that Santa doesn't listen to your prayers. And so then they started having doubts about belief in God. And then the professor learned that it wasn't that these kids directed their anger towards their parents. These kids directed their anger towards belief in things they cannot see. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And as we know, al-rukn of our deen is iman bil what? Bil ghaib. And so these beliefs are also pervert and distort and undermine belief in the unseen. So these are not small matters that we're dealing with. Both of these traditions, these holidays that we are in right now, coming out of Christmas, going into New Year's, these are not just about national holidays. These are times when the morality and the deen and the religion of children is undermined and attacked. And as Muslims, we have to look at that. We have to think about that. We have to see that the asl of this has to do with not just nifaq, but lies as well. And so I'll conclude this khatira with the reminder about that hadith, about the one who wants to say something very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, not to a nas, لِيُضَحَّكُ مِنْهُ الْقَوْمِ, as if it's a public matter. Qawm is a big term, means a group of people. He didn't say to make a person laugh, right? Or to make people laugh. He said to make a qawm laugh, to make a population, or a nation, or a tribe, or a community, to make them laugh, فَيَكْذِبْ. And he lies in the process. Just to get that little laugh, just to get that little thing, that little holiday, that little appeal, that little character, something he thinks is so small, فَوَيْلٌ لَهُ, but in the realm of Allah Ta'ala, it is mighty. So let us be mindful of this time that we're in. Let us think twice about saying Happy New Year and thinking that there's nothing behind these things. Let us engage in conversation with our kids about the fitrah, that it's okay to acknowledge a new year. That's fine in the general sense that it's a new time, but in reality, a day is a day. A next day is a next day. And the year is not guaranteed to anybody. And we don't assess our ajal, our life in years. We assess our ajal in nafs, in breaths. Right? And every single breath we take, we should give shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should evaluate that breath to make sure it's spent in sidq, in truth, and not in kadhib and lies. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك التواب الرحيم ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما والحمد لله رب العالمين